We all go a little mad sometimes. Psycho wasn't just Alfred Hitchcock's black and white thriller. It was a cultural earthquake that forever changed the language of horror. Behind the piercing violins and shower curtains lay chaos. Censors fighting Hitchcock, actors pushed to breaking points, and experimental tricks with chocolate syrup, sound effects, and editing that fooled the human mind. This isn't just a film, it's a vault of secrets. Today we're opening it to reveal 20 weird facts about Psycho that'll shock you. And stay until the very end. The bonus fact is something even the most obsessive Hitchcock fans rarely hear. Let's pull back the curtain. Hitchcock bought the rights in secret. When Robert Bloch's Psycho novel was published in 1959, Hitchcock instantly saw its potential, but he also saw a danger, spoilers. Determined to keep the ending hidden, he used his agent to secretly buy the rights for just $9,500. Then, in a move bordering on obsession, he ordered his assistants to sweep through bookstores and buy every remaining copy in circulation. His goal: ensure no one could ruin the shocks for audiences. This wasn't just a director making a film, it was a general waging psychological warfare. By silencing the book, Hitchcock weaponized mystery itself. When viewers finally sat down in theaters, they knew nothing of Norman Bates or The Shower. The twist hit like a thunderclap precisely because Hitchcock had erased the paper trail. Paramount didn't want to make it. Hitchcock was Paramount's star director, yet when he pitched Psycho, the studio recoiled. They called the story distasteful, cheap, and even revolting. They wanted him to make another glossy thriller like North by Northwest, not a tale about a transvestite killer running a rundown motel, so Paramount refused to finance it. Hitchcock didn't back down. Instead, he mortgaged his own house, slashed the budget, and filmed at Universal using the lean crew from his TV show Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He even shot in black and white to avoid censors, accusing him of showing excessive gore. The gamble paid off spectacularly. Psycho earned over $50 million, making Hitchcock richer than many studio heads. What Paramount dismissed as trash became the single most profitable project of his career, not rejection, liberation. The shower scene took a week to film. On screen, the shower murder runs just 45 seconds, but behind the curtain, it took 7 exhausting days, 70 camera setups, and 77 edits. Janet Leigh stood in freezing water hour after hour, growing so raw and exhausted that she later swore she'd never take a real shower again. Hitchcock choreographed the camera like a dancer, never once showing the knife actually penetrate flesh. Instead, he used clever cuts, suggestive shadows, and sound effects to trick the brain into seeing violence that wasn't really there. The stabbing sound came from plunging a knife into from cassava melon and raw meat. What audiences thought was a brutal slaying was really an editing symphony. Hitchcock proved terror wasn't about what you saw. It was about what your mind insisted was happening between the cuts. The blood was chocolate syrup. Audiences swore they saw real blood spiraling down the drain, but Hitchcock's secret weapon was sitting in a grocery aisle. Cinematographer John L. Russell discovered that Hershey's chocolate syrup photographed perfectly in black and white. Its thickness and gleam mimicked blood far better than stage paint, which looked too thin under studio lights. Janet Leigh recalled how sticky it felt against her skin, making the horror disturbingly tangible. Hitchcock himself insisted on watching the syrup swirl down the drain in take after take until the spiral matched his vision. This wasn't gore. It was an edible illusion. And that's what made it so powerful. By exploiting the contrast of syrup against porcelain, Hitchcock convinced millions that they'd seen one of cinema's bloodiest murders, when in fact it was pure dessert trickery. Anthony Perkins was barely paid. Norman Bates became Anthony Perkins' legacy, but it didn't make him rich. Because Hitchcock treated Psycho as a low-budget gamble, Perkins was paid just $40,000. a fraction of what stars of his caliber normally earned. Worse, Hitchcock deliberately shielded him from the press. Perkins wasn't allowed to appear on promotional tours or talk shows. Hitchcock believed keeping Norman invisible preserved the film's mystery. The result? Perkins never fully cashed in on his most famous role. Instead, he was typecast for decades as the boyish psychopath, rarely offered romantic leads again. His biggest role became his biggest burden. Not a stepping stone, but a trapdoor. Perkins once confessed he could never escape Norman Bates because Hitchcock had chained his career to that motel forever. Hitchcock tormented Janet Leigh. Hitchcock had a reputation for cruelty toward actresses, and Janet Leigh experienced it firsthand. During the shower scene, she endured 70 different takes, often without explanation. Hitchcock would stand behind the camera smirking, offering vague notes like, "Do it again," this time with more fear. Leigh later admitted she felt truly violated, describing the filming as the closest I've ever felt to being murdered. Afterward, she refused to take showers for the rest of her life, opting only for baths. Leigh confessed she always locked her bathroom door and pulled the curtain open whenever possible. Hitchcock's obsession blurred the line between performance and reality. He didn't just direct her terror, he manufactured it, searing it into her psyche forever. The horror of Psycho wasn't just on film, it lived in Janet Leigh's memory. The score almost didn't exist. That screeching violin theme is one of the most famous pieces of music ever composed. Yet Hitchcock initially wanted the shower scene played in silence. He thought the visuals alone were shocking enough. Bernard Herrmann, his longtime composer, disagreed. Without telling Hitchcock, he scored the scene with a furious arrangement of shrill violins, cellos, and violas. When Hitchcock finally heard it, he changed his mind instantly. He not only kept the music, he doubled Herrmann's salary, declaring, "You have made this picture." Herrmann's stabbing strings transformed the scene from unsettling to unbearable. It wasn't just music, it was sonic terror. Without it, Psycho might never have been remembered as the birth of modern horror. Not silence, but sound, etched it into eternity. Hitchcock banned late arrivals to theaters. When Psycho premiered, Hitchcock introduced a radical new rule. No one would be admitted after the film started. This was unheard of in 1960 when audiences wandered in and out freely. His reasoning was simple but brilliant. Since Janet Leigh dies so early, latecomers would be confused looking for her. Theater managers protested, but Hitchcock insisted. He even provided cardboard standees of himself, pointing to clocks, warning, "No one, but no one, will be admitted after the start." Audiences lined up outside in droves waiting for the next showing. Instead of hurting sales, it fueled demand, creating a buzz of exclusivity. People felt they weren't just seeing a movie, they were part of an event, not just suspense on screen, but in the lobby. Hitchcock weaponized anticipation itself, turning rules into marketing gold. The film nearly failed the censors. In 1960, the production code still held sway, and Psycho pushed every boundary. The shower scene horrified censors, not only for its violence, but because Janet Leigh's navel was briefly visible, something strictly forbidden at the time. They also objected to Norman Bates watching Marion through a peephole, calling it perverse. Hitchcock fought back with his usual cunning. He resubmitted the exact same cut after pretending to make changes, gambling that different board members would view it less harshly. The trick worked, and the scene passed. Hitchcock later bragged that he never altered a frame. What the censors thought was compliance was actually defiance. Psycho didn't just slip past the code, it shattered it, setting Hollywood on the path toward the ratings system that replaced censorship a few years later. The toilet flush was revolutionary. It sounds mundane today, but in 1960, a flushing toilet had never been shown in an American film. Hitchcock insisted on including one when Marion Crane tears up her stolen money calculations, and flushes them in the Bates Motel bathroom. Censors debated whether it was too indecent to show. Hitchcock held his ground, declaring the flush was essential to the story's realism. When audiences saw it, many gasped. Some even wrote letters of complaint. Yet this simple detail marked a turning point. Hollywood's sanitization of everyday life cracked open. Hitchcock didn't just depict murder, he depicted a toilet dragging cinema into the unfiltered, uncomfortable real world. And ironically, it was that flush, not the stabbing, that became one of the film's most radical taboos broken. Mid-roll engagement hook. By now you can see how Psycho wasn't just scary, it was revolutionary, breaking rules at every turn. And we're only halfway there. If you're loving these shocking facts, go ahead and like and subscribe because the next set gets even wilder, including a secret prop switch that fooled everyone and Hitchcock's own chilling cameo. Hitchcock used ice-cold water on Janet Leigh. Janet Leigh often recalled the shower scene as a genuine nightmare. Beyond the endless takes, Hitchcock insisted the water remain ice-cold for much of the shoot. Why? Cold water made her shiver uncontrollably, amplifying the terror on her face. Leigh begged for warmer temperatures, but Hitchcock refused, believing discomfort bred authenticity. Crew members admitted they felt guilty watching her endure it, but no one challenged the director. Leigh later said she didn't feel like she was acting. She was just trying to survive the ordeal. It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. Hitchcock wanted the camera to capture real physiological reactions. But for Leigh, the trauma lasted years. She joked that Psycho saved her water bill because she never took showers again, only baths. Not staged fear, genuine dread bottled on film. Hitchcock's cameo almost ruined the film. Hitchcock was famous for popping up in his own movies, and in Psycho, he appears early, standing outside Marion's office wearing a cowboy hat. But he later worried the cameo was too distracting. Audiences were trained to scan for his appearances, and spotting him early might take them out of the story. He strategically placed himself before the plot's suspense began, hoping viewers would then focus fully on the film. Still, his brief appearance sparked laughs at some screenings, a risk for a movie built on fear. Hitchcock once said, "If I come in too late, the audience will spend the picture looking for me instead of watching the story." In other words, his ego nearly sabotaged his masterpiece, but timing saved it. Not a gimmick. A gamble that barely worked. Perkins and Leigh never shared a scene. One of the strangest quirks of Psycho is that Norman Bates and Marion Crane, the two central characters, never actually share screen time. Perkins and Leigh never speak a line to each other in the entire film. Their relationship exists only through editing, his watchful eyes, her nervous glances, and the infamous peephole. Hitchcock deliberately avoided direct interaction, heightening the sense of voyeurism and isolation. Perkins wasn't even on set when the shower scene was filmed. His doubles handled the knife shots. The absence makes Norman's intrusion more sinister, as if he's always lurking but never present. What audiences didn't realize is that Hitchcock crafted their connection entirely in the editing room, not face-to-face tension, but distance, dread, and imagination filling the gaps. The original trailer was 6 minutes long. Instead of cutting a traditional trailer, Hitchcock personally narrated a 6-minute guided tour of the Bates Motel. In it, he cheerfully strolls through the house, hinting at sinister happenings in the bathroom, without showing a single scene from the film. The marketing was mischievous, playful, and chilling all at once. By avoiding footage, Hitchcock preserved the mystery while selling the terror. Viewers lined up intrigued, knowing almost nothing except that something horrific awaited. Hitchcock later explained he wanted audiences to experience the film, not preview it. The gamble paid off. Audiences swarmed theaters out of pure curiosity. Not a trailer, but a tease. A masterclass in suspenseful marketing that modern studios still study today. The film's budget was only $800,000, despite being one of cinema's most influential works. Psycho was made on a shoestring budget of just $800,000, less than many TV shows of the era. Hitchcock slashed costs everywhere, shooting in black and white, using his Alfred Hitchcock Presents crew, and filming on Universal's standing sets. He even limited location shooting, relying mostly on sound stages. To save money on extras, he borrowed employees from the lot to fill in background roles. This tight budget forced creativity, pushing Hitchcock into bold choices like minimal gore and suggestive editing. Ironically, these limitations made the film scarier. The audience's imagination filled the gaps where money couldn't. The result? A box office juggernaut that earned over $50 million, more than 60 times its cost. What studios dismissed as cheap became the definition of profitable, not compromise. Alchemy. Critics initially hated it. Today, Psycho is hailed as a masterpiece, but in 1960, critics tore it apart. The New York Times called it a blot on an otherwise honorable career. Variety labeled it repulsive. Reviewers sneered at Hitchcock for stooping to cheap horror, but audiences disagreed. Lines stretched around blocks and word of mouth made the film unstoppable. As the money poured in, critics began backpedaling, reevaluating the film's artistry. Within a few years, scholars declared Psycho groundbreaking. Hitchcock himself shrugged, saying, "Audiences are wiser than critics." Not instant acclaim, redemption through popular demand, the arc from trash to treasure only amplified its legend. What looked like exploitation turned into evolution. Today, the same reviews that dismissed it are studied as proof of how art can blindside the establishment. Norman Bates was based on a real killer. Robert Bloch's novel, which inspired Hitchcock, drew from the crimes of Ed Gein, a Wisconsin murderer who shocked America in the 1950s. Gein robbed graves, crafted furniture from human remains, and lived in a decaying farmhouse with a domineering mother who warped his psyche. Sound familiar? Hitchcock never marketed the connection directly, but audiences subconsciously linked Norman Bates to real-life horror. Later, Gein also inspired the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Silence of the Lambs. But it was Psycho that first transformed his grotesque crimes into mainstream art. Norman Bates wasn't a cartoon villain. He was ripped from headlines, a reminder that monsters didn't lurk only in haunted castles. They lived next door. Hitchcock blurred fiction with fact, dragging horror into modern suburbia, not fantasy. Reality dressed in mother's clothes. Hitchcock manipulated publicity with mystery envelopes. To preserve secrecy, Hitchcock took extraordinary steps. He demanded that theaters protect the twist by handing audiences sealed envelopes upon entry that read, "Don't reveal the ending to your friends." Ushers were trained to enforce silence, and press kits included strict instructions forbidding spoilers. Hitchcock even refused to allow critics advance screenings, fearing leaks. Instead, they had to watch alongside regular audiences. The stunt created unprecedented buzz. People wanted to know what was inside the envelope of secrets. Hitchcock turned spoilers into a forbidden fruit decades before spoiler culture existed. Not passive marketing, active control. By treating the film like a classified document, he made Psycho feel dangerous. Viewers weren't just watching a movie. They were part of a conspiracy to protect its shock. Hitchcock paid crew out of pocket. Because studios refused to back him, Hitchcock took personal responsibility for the payroll. To save costs, he asked cast and crew to work for reduced wages in exchange for a share of the profits. Janet Leigh agreed, taking a smaller upfront fee to support the production. Hitchcock himself skipped his usual $250,000 salary, instead negotiating 60% of the profits. That gamble made him millions. While many crew members earned far more than their usual studio wages once the box office exploded. It wasn't just a director's vanity project, it was a team betting on a vision. Hitchcock turned risk into reward, proving that creative independence could be more lucrative than studio contracts. Not exploitation, partnership in fear. The ending was almost different. In early drafts, Norman Bates's reveal was far less chilling. Some versions suggested his guilt ambiguously, without the now iconic final monologue in his mother's voice. Hitchcock knew ambiguity wasn't enough. Audiences needed to leave haunted. So he worked with Perkins to craft that eerie final shot, Norman grinning faintly as Mother whispers, "I wouldn't even harm a fly." The chilling stare directly into the camera froze audiences in terror. Hitchcock ended not with action, but with psychology. Instead of explaining Norman, he let the madness linger, crawling under the skin of viewers for decades. That smile wasn't just a performance. It was cinema's way of saying, evil doesn't die, it just hides in plain sight. The studio didn't want the shower scene at all. The single most iconic sequence in horror almost didn't exist. Paramount executives begged Hitchcock to cut the shower murder entirely, calling it exploitative. They worried it would disgust audiences and ruin his reputation. Hitchcock refused. To prove them wrong, he screened the unscored scene for the studio, deliberately leaving it flat and silent. Executives yawned, smugly declaring it pointless. Then Hitchcock revealed his trap. He replayed the same footage, but this time with Bernard Herrmann's screeching strings. The room went silent. Executives sat pale and shaken. In that moment, Hitchcock proved his genius. The scene wasn't just shocking, it was art, and without it, Psycho wouldn't have made history. Psycho wasn't just another thriller, it was a cinematic rebellion, cheap, risky, and despised by critics, yet loved by audiences. It broke censorship rules, upended marketing norms, and inspired generations of horror. Hitchcock turned chocolate syrup into blood, toilets into controversy, and silence into screams. 60 years later, we're still talking about it. That's not just filmmaking, that's immortality. If these shocking secrets blew your mind, hit like, subscribe, and share your favorite fact in the comments. And remember, we all go a little mad sometimes.